How's it going, everyone? This is the George here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Shazam. This is the 2019 DCEU film directed by David F. Sandberg and stars Zachary Levi and Asher Angel as Shazam slash Billy Batson. And in this film, we are introduced to Billy Batson, and he's a teenager that's been in and out of foster homes. He's trying to find his real mom, and he goes into this new foster home. And while this is all happening, he gets the powers of Shazam, and he needs to stop Dr. Savannah, played by Mark Strong, who has the powers of the seven deadly sins. And this was a DCEU film that definitely feels a lot different from the previous DCEU movies that came out before it. You had the films directed by Zack Snyder, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman. You had movies like Wonder Woman and Aquaman that were connected to those previous DCEU movies, but had a pretty good balance of light and dark. The Zack Snyder movies, whether you love them or hate them, I know they're always a topic of controversy and arguments, are known for being more dark and serious. So with Shazam, like I remember seeing the preview of this back in 2018. It was around the time of San Diego Comic Con, and I was very intrigued by the trailer. I don't know Shazam as well as I know all the other DC heroes that I grew up with, like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, and Aquaman. But yet the trailer showed this as a fun, entertaining film. And going into this film, I remember watching it, and I was definitely entertained by this film. In fact, I even did a review for my college newspaper. It was like the first written review that I did. I sometimes write reviews for the movie nerds, but this was when I was a college student still. I wrote a review for Shazam. And it's been a while since I watched this film, but with Shazam Fury of the Gods coming out, and the fact that I want to review the DCEU movies that I haven't reviewed yet this year, I figured now's the perfect time to talk about Shazam. And going back and rewatching Shazam, I do feel like this film actually holds up very well nearly 4 years later. This is a very entertaining film that feels unique in its own way. At the time this film came out, a lot of solo superhero films were starting to feel cookie cutter and generic. And you can make the case that that could be for Marvel films. Yeah, that is true for Marvel films. But even some DC movies, Aquaman, which came out before, while I enjoyed Aquaman, it did have some cookie cutter elements to it. But with Shazam, it feels like they kind of went back to the roots of solo superhero films, where you have a villain with a backstory that you understand their motivations. You have very good supporting characters surrounding the superhero, and they have good character development themselves. The hero themselves, we understand this character and their backstory a lot better, and you feel for them. I'm not saying you don't feel that for solo films nowadays, but solo films, for the most part, do feel cookie cutter. And Shazam feels unique in its own way. Obviously, it takes inspiration from Big, which is another movie about a kid that becomes an adult. But it also reminded me of the Goonies with the adventure aspect with the kids in certain scenes. So like, it definitely has like 1980s a 1980s feel to it, but like in a modern day setting. But let's get to Billy Batson. So I remember when I first watched this film, Billy Batson saying, while I liked Asher Angel's performance, at times he does come across as a bit unlikable. But at the same time, when you look at the hand that he's been dealt with, you kind of understand where he's coming from. He just wants to find his real mom. He's been in and out of foster homes, and he kind of feels like he's been on his own. He feels like no one's really cared for him. But then he gets this foster family that does care for him, and it's hard for him to kind of accept it. But like then he becomes friends with Freddie Freeman, and I like Freddie. I like the dynamic that these two have, and like how he wants to be Billy's friend and wants to be his brother. And the kids in general, the foster family, I will say, I remember when I first watched this movie, I was kind of worried how the foster family would play out, but they are very likable. The kids are very likable, the foster siblings, and you can easily connect to any of these siblings. You can be like, oh, I have a sibling like that, or I have a cousin like that, or I even have a friend, or I know someone that's like that. They each have their own different personalities and traits, and I like that. And I also like the foster parents a lot. They're very very nice. The actors do a great job of portraying them. Zachary Levi, when he's Shazam, I also love his performance. I can tell he had a lot of fun playing this character. The one thing I notice is like Billy Batson is a lot more serious, but when he's Shazam, he's a lot more childish. But that's kind of how I feel like any teenager or kid would feel if they become an adult. They can take advantage of things like, getting beer at the store or other things. And like if you have superpowers, like when he's testing out his powers, I feel like that's the most realistic take on a teenager that got powers and became an adult. Just fooling around with them, doing dumb, stupid things that, they'll enjoy doing. I will say the soundtrack, while I like the song choices, at times, especially like when he's testing out the powers, the soundtrack isn't going to stand out as much as previous DCEU soundtracks. One thing I will say, especially about, the early DCEU films, are that they had unique scores to them. This score was fine, but nothing really that stands out. Dr. Savannah. So Mark Strong, this isn't the first time that he's played a DC character. He was Sinestro in the 2011 Green Lantern film. He was like one of the few good things about that film. But I'm glad that he got another chance at portraying a DC character. He's not my favorite DCEU villain, but I think he's one of the better DCEU villains. Like I said before, you understand his backstory. You understand that, that he's got a strained relationship with his father and his brother, and you understand why he wants this power. And just the performance that he gives, this is definitely one of the better villains. The motivations are clear. And I feel like also we get a good enough amount of screen time with this villain. And I like that. I feel like sometimes we don't focus enough on the villains. Like, yeah, we want to have great heroes, but we also want to have great villains to, clash with our hero. The other thing that I like about this film is that the stakes don't feel like they have to be big in this film. They're still big stakes, but like they're not as like world ending as in previous DC movies. And the humor, I very much enjoyed the humor. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy my serious superhero films, movies like The Dark Knight and Logan, but I also like superhero movies that can be fun, that can be entertaining, that don't have to be serious all the time. And it's not like everything in this film is like goofy or entertaining. There are serious moments in this film. For example, Billy Batson's trying to find his mom, and that's very serious. And then when he finds her and understands why he was abandoned by her, that's pretty serious, dark stuff that's going on. And that's when Billy realizes who his real family has been all this time. But it's like moments like that that are the heart and soul of the film. His true family, this foster family that does love and care for him. Billy realizing what it means to be in a family. Moments like that. And also the scene where like the seven deadly sins are killing Savannah's father and all these people that work for his father. That's pretty dark. Like it does feel a bit out of place for like a film that feels more lighthearted. But yeah, I enjoyed that. The action, not the best action in a DCEU film, but it is entertaining. Special effects work I did enjoy in this film. The third act, I enjoyed the third act. I enjoyed, the kids getting their powers, helping Billy slash Shazam fight against Savannah and the seven deadly sins. There was like a moment where I felt like it was starting to drag a little bit, but there was never a dull moment. And like that's the thing about this film. There's never a dull moment in it. And honestly, this is one of the better DCEU films. Um, it's another one that's also longer than the 2017 Justice League film, like 10 minutes longer. Like that film was only 2 hours. This is 2 hours and 12 minutes. Like, come on, DC. If you can get Shazam right, you could have gotten Justice League right. I mean, we did get the Snyder Cut. I do love the Snyder Cut. But overall, with Shazam, I enjoyed this film. I enjoyed the performances. I like Zachary Levi in this role. I can't wait to see Shazam Fury of the Gods this weekend. Mark Strong as Savannah is one of the better villains in the DCEU. And I've been kind of conflicted about my grade for this film. But for right now, I'm going to give Shazam an A minus. I feel like this film has actually aged a lot better in the last few years. I think it was the right movie to come out at the time that it did. And I think like in like the almost 4 years since this film came out, as we've seen other comic book movies, especially solo comic book films, some of them are good, some of them not so good. I feel like this film has actually aged better in that regard. The only major crime with this film is when these movies are released. I remember this film came out in between Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame and Shazam Fury of the Gods. I know it's getting a mixed response so far, but it could still turn out good. And some people seem to like this movie so far. The problem that these films have is that Warner Brothers just releases them at the weirdest times. Like Fury of the Gods was supposed to come out around the same time as Avatar: The Way of Water, and this film is coming out in a crowd in March. But we'll see. We'll see how the film turns out. But like I said, I'm gonna give this film an A minus, and I highly recommend you check it out. I think it's a great movie. It's definitely one of the better solo films that we've gotten in like the last 5 years or so. And what did you guys think of Shazam? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And what's your favorite DCEU movie? Let me know in the comments down below. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe already if you haven't. Please share this with someone that loves Shazam, that loves DCEU films. And I hope to see you guys real soon. Take care, everyone.